الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر. استغفر الله.
Inshallah, our session with regard to Islamic wills will start after the remainder of the Salah. So we'll ask everyone to, inshallah, again, come closer to the area we usually conduct our programs after the remainder of the Salah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum. No, it's fine. I don't. This is working. Can you hear me? Hello? No? Yeah, it's a bit low. You think we can manage this one? That one? Or we can just. Those fit in here? That's not a problem. There. Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if you guys can hear me. I don't know how this thing. Like this? Much better, right? Oh no, I broke it. Yes, I broke it. No, it is broken. Inshallah, I'll work till we finish. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Yeah, you can. Okay, take inshallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ من الشيطان الرجيم كل نفس ذائقة الموت. وقال الله عز وجل فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز. Respected listeners, I want to set the expectations before we start the program. Initially, I think that flyer that went out said Islamic inheritance and will. If we stay here to discuss in Islamic inheritance, we'll be here for around 4 hours at least, and we still wouldn't be getting through it. Not because Islamic inheritance is particularly long, but because Islamic inheritance covers many different perspectives. And that is exactly one of the reasons we encourage Islamic will, because living in America, which is a non-Islamic country, and they have their own laws, which are not governed or does not accommodate Islamic law. However, they have the scope for us to implement Islamic law as long as we do our due diligence and we do what needs to be done from beforehand. However, if we're going to be lazy about it and we're going to say, when the time comes, we'll deal with it, then subhanAllah, when the time comes, then we will not be able to deal with it, and it will be overly complicated, and sometimes it will be so complicated that the people who thought they would benefit a little bit, they'll get no benefit, zero benefit out of it. And that is the sad part. The way I look at it is each one of us put in the time, effort, money, sweat and blood to earn money. Yes? And now equally, the more money we have, the more responsibility we have. That's on the Day of Judgment, what did Rasulullah ﷺ say? That a feet of a person will not move until he's asked about certain things. And one of the statements is how he earned the money and where he utilized. وَمَا فَعَلَ بِهِ. Listen, what he did with it. Listen, that's what will be questioned about. And so a person may say, hey, there's so much money, I have to spend so much money to do all these process, I don't want to do it. A person may say, well, will Allah hold you responsible? Yes. Just as you put all that time in to accumulate that money, you're also liable to put in that much amount of money to ensure that wealth is utilized in the correct place. That's your responsibility. Thus, when we look into the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originally, before the inheritance law came down, there was one plain simple verse in the Quran. كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية الوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين. This was the law before the inheritance verse. And what is it? That it has been ordained for you. It was what? It was farad. إذا حضر أحدكم الموت, that when death comes upon you, إن ترك خيرا الوصية, that it will be better for you to leave a wasiyah. For the who? Walidain wal aqrabin, family members, etc. This was the law before. And this was farad. Once the ayah known in Surah An-Nisa came down, then this verse was partially abrogated. What does it mean partially abrogated? That the faradiyah, the obligation of it no more remained, but this part, the wasiyah part, as a recommendation still remained. So it is still recommended for us, even living in an Islamic country, where the law would just take care of everything, is still recommended for us to do wasiyah. And this recommendation for multiple reasons, inshallah, we're going to get to that. When going to inheritance, we look at it, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu is commanded by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "O Abu Hurairah, learn about inheritance and teach it, for it is half of knowledge, but it will be forgotten." It will be forgotten. SubhanAllah, today's time and age, the law of inheritance of Islam is pretty much forgotten. And I would say, this is not a warning from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of adab, but of nature. What do a lot of people, yes, a person can take it as we go close Day of Judgment, knowledge will be lost. But I believe it's part of nature. What does that mean? How many times in a day do you pray salah? 5 times. And yet a lot of times we don't know laws. True or false? Now inheritance, how many times in my life do I have to deal with inheritance? I don't deal with that part either. Only if I'm getting money, I'm worried about it. If I'm not getting money, well, who cares about it? That's pretty much how it is. So we don't deal with it on a daily basis. And so, anything that's out of sight, out of mind. So that's pretty much how it is. We don't deal with inheritance on a daily basis, and that's why most of us are not aware of the laws of inheritance, even simple ones, right? So, thus, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying there's something that will be forgotten. This is the first thing that will be taken away from my nation. This part is a warning. That even to those people who will be told many a times, because they will not find benefit in it, they'll just ignore it. And this is a warning from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You'll be surprised. Now, I was in South Africa. When I was doing my ifta, I was studying, and our Muftī Tawṣīf, who is regarded as one of the senior Muftis of the entire country of South Africa, and over there's families who have lived over there for ages. We're talking about 7, 8 generations. And 7, 8 generations, you have almost 50 people passing away. And they're huge families. One of these families started coming to him that after a couple of generations, they finally decided, you know what, we want to act upon Islam and actually distribute our inheritance. And anyone who has dealt with inheritance before, when you deal with inheritance which has not been distributed for the past 7 generations, every single person who died within that time limit, when they died, how, all that is taken into account. One mistake will change the entire calculation all over, upside down. So nevertheless, just one of these groups of people came and they presented, and if I remember correctly, there was 37 people who had died from the last time inheritance was ever distributed. So that means it had to be divided that many times over. So our Darul Ifta worked everything out, checked it, rechecked it, called up all those family members that were in there. Do you know of anyone else that may have passed away? Everything. And then after we did it, we called the family in, And the family said, oh, a couple of dates over there were wrong. Recalculate the whole thing, whole process again. So this went on 1 year, 2 years. Finally, after 5 years, so I was there on the 5th year. After 5 years, this had already been happening. I was there for the 5th year. People walked in, and some of the people, they had the previous calculations in front of them. One of the families were supposed to get, according to the previous calculation, were supposed to receive around 3 million rands. After recalculation, they were getting 250,000. They were not happy about it. And one guy pulled a gun out. Muftī Sahib, because of you, we're getting this much less. Muftī Sahib's like, you know what? That's not my job. My job is to what? Tell you what is right and wrong. And I'm not going to back down from that. At the end of the day, if you decide not to act upon, you have to answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And subhanAllah, this is how it becomes. When money comes into play, and especially large amounts of money, if things are not taken care of diligently from before, this is where we end up. And subhanAllah, as a few scholars put it, and I believe so as well, if we're not going to take care of it, our children are not going to take care of it. Down the line, if someone tries to, they're going to face these types of problems. So nevertheless, Ibn Umar says, it's not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will to stay for 2 nights without having his last will and testament written and kept ready with him, as if to say it is almost fard to do so. Hadith Jabir says, he who dies living a will, has died following a path of sunnah. He has died piously and testifying to a true faith, and his death, he has died with his sins forgiven, inshallah. And the main reason is, what does this have to do with sins? Because many times the sins that accumulate have to do with wealth. And subhanAllah, if we have not we have not done our due diligence, afterwards, the rest of the people, the sins they will be involved in is because I did not do my part. Now, 4 levels of wasiyah. I want everyone to focus on this. Number 1 is wajib, and this is very important, especially in America, America. Now, these 4 categories are under circumstances where there's already Islamic law. Then, that's owed, that's wajib, without looking in America. Right? In America, I believe it's fard. What is it? Fard. Why is it fard? Because if you don't have a wasiyah, then what's going to happen? Then the estate is going to apply the way they're going to do it. They're going to do 50-50 on if everyone is deceased, then it just goes to the estate. And the entire family loses out from any beneficiary, taking any benefit from the wealth you have accumulated over your time. Everything is gone. 0. And subhanAllah, what is the funding? You guys know what's funding. So that's one thing. So in America, it's fard to leave a wasiyah behind. Now, if you look into the Quran, there's a few places Allah talks about wasiyah. The most important wasiyah we find in the Quran is وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ بَنِيهُ وَيَعْقُوبُ يَا بَنِيَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اصْطَفَى لَكُمُ الدِّينَ فَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. The wasiyah left behind by Ibrahim alayhi salam for his children, that do not die except in the condition of iman. And I link this to that because when we don't leave a wasiyah behind with regard to the wealth we have accumulated, the children are in hopes, whether we like it or not, inshallah, they don't want us to die. But nevertheless, they expect some of the wealth our parents have will come onto us and to help us in life. And when they find out they're not getting any of it because mom or dad did not do due diligence, like, what kind of man is this? And sometimes they don't only lose hope in you, they lose hope in you as a believer. And impacts what? Their iman. And that is something we have to be truly cognizant about. Is my actions going to lead to the detriment of my children's iman? That is something we need to watch. Now, nevertheless, wajib, that's owed. Number 2, zakat that needs to be discharged, salah and fast that have not been fulfilled. This is also wajib because otherwise those are not going to be absolved of those. And very shortly, for example, if a person has a certain amount of fast, which he could have made up, and did not make up. If he never had the possibility of making it, for example, he was sick, and so he became terminally ill, and he doesn't have to make wasiyah of that, that's fine. How? In the same way, salawat. However, if he was able to make them up, he did not make them up, then it is necessary for him to leave a wasiyah, but that also from only 1/3 of his wealth. He cannot go 1/3. Why? Because that money does not belong to him anymore. And another thing I want everyone to put in everyone's mind, that the wealth we have is a amanah by us. The wealth we have is a amanah by us. We don't get to do as we wish with it. The day we die, the wealth is taken back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah decrees how it should be used. One of the topics, one of the reasons today I didn't want to get into inheritance, because inheritance, when we explain it in this American context, a wisdom has to be explained behind it. Otherwise, people just don't like many of the things. But today, just for the cause of brevity, let's put this in our mind. The wealth belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thus Allah dictates how the wealth is to be used. That includes after we die. Many a times, the wisdom given to us by us human beings to explain the hikmah of Allah is deficient. So we will try to give benefits and wisdom behind it, why Allah did what He did, but yet our wisdom nowhere close to the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we may not understand, but yet we have to follow the law. Yes. Number 2 is mustahab, using Sharia options given to us to benefit our hereafter and help those who are not inheritors. And this is the part, son, even in the ayat of wasiyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says those people who will be around of family members to stipulate a minimal amount which will not hurt all the other inheritors is beneficial. On top of that, if we know some other people could benefit, which have been cancelled out, definitely it will be a means of sadaqah for us, as we will find in the hadith of Sa'd radiyallahu anhu. Typical example, let's say an uncle does not inherit in the presence of father and parents. Let's say if I pass away, my father and parents are alive, I have children, my uncles don't inherit. But let's say one of my uncles are poor, or even one of my cousins are very poor, they're not going to inherit. So from my 1/3 share, what can I do? I can take out a small bit and say this is dedicated for him, and this can help him out. What have I done? I have mended family relationship, and I have benefited the person, and I have made my akhirah. I have that option. But if I do not make that wasiyah, will that happen? No, it will not happen. And in America, it becomes even harder. Because in an Islamic country, I can just write and have 2 witnesses sign off on it and everything is done. In America, if it doesn't go through a legal system, that I can write how many I want, I can have how many witnesses I want. It's going to go through a court case. If the judge agrees with what he sees, and the people around there agree, then it may go through. Otherwise, all the money might be finished with all the court cases and everything. By the time you're done, everything is gone. You have nothing left. So that's another loss. Makruh, it bequests that harms eligible recipients. Let's say I know my son is struggling, and he is going to inherit after I die, but I have an issue with him, so I bequest 1/3 away so that he gets a lesser amount. So that comes down to intention. You intentionally do certain moves because of which certain inheritors will not benefit or benefit less. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that is makruh, disliked. And haram, favoring certain inheritance over others. In Islamic country, they'll look at it, they'll cancel out, it will not even be applied. But in America, if you wrote it down, especially through the legal system, it will be applied and you will be sinful for causing that to happen. So that is haram, not permissible. The third rule of prophetic guidance. As I mentioned, that many bequests that you can make is only limited to 1/3. Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I'm going to jump to Hadith of Sa'd radiyallahu anhu. Sa'd says, may I bequest all my property? Rasulullah said no. Half of it, Rasulullah said no. 1/3, Rasulullah 1/3, yet it is still too much. Then Rasulullah says, you would better leave your inheritors wealthy than leave them poor. You better, now, I want everyone to understand this differently, because some people take this hadith and say, you know what, I'm going to put my blood and sweat in, even if that means compromising my deen so I can leave my children more wealthy. That's not what it means. It means, if Allah has blessed me with wealth, don't squander it away. That's what it means. It doesn't mean I have to put my blood and sweat in to make as much money as possible, so for the next 7 generations, my children don't have to work. That is not the meaning of this hadith. Do not take the hadith for the wrong meaning. No. If Allah has blessed me with wealth, do not squander it away. Be diligent. Leave it the way it can benefit others. However, that's not my purpose of life to earn for the next few generations. That is the purpose of my life. Never. Whatever you spend will be considered a sadaqah for you. Even the mouthful of food you put into the mouth of your wife. So subhanallah, sometimes we take this hadith literally. But if you pass away and the money is left in inheritance for your wife, and your wife is able to benefit from that wealth, you get the what? The reward of sadaqah for as long as she benefits from the wealth. Subhanallah. And that's only for your wife. Applies to her children and grandchildren if they continue to benefit from there. Right? Key principle from this hadith, maximum benefits 1/3, no more than 1/3 of the estate may be directed. No bequest to the heirs. That is very, very important. No bequest can be made to the heirs. So if someone is already inheriting, for example, you have children, direct children, your son and daughter are going to inherit. You cannot leave a bequest for them in addition to what they're already inheriting. If you're leaving behind a wife, then your wife is going to inherit. Then she cannot be given any additional parts. You can leave a request. Sometimes a person may request. And if every other inheritor, without feeling bad, and this is the key point, sometimes, let's say there's 10 inheritors, and you wrote down something, and let's say there's 8 inheritors say yes, happily. 2 inheritors, what did it feel like? If we say no, then everyone's going to make fun of us or ostracize us, and they're going to think that they're going to make fun of us. What did they do? They give in. That's dhulm. What is that? Dhulm. That's oppression. And we and the inheritors will be liable for that oppression that we have caused, because we force people to give away their right without being happily giving it away. And that's why we should be very careful, understand, that we should not go beyond the 1/3. We think we're benefiting someone, but in reality we're causing harm. Allah knows where the benefit is, and why. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid down the laws. Leaving wealth in sadaqah, if we know all our inheritors, mashallah, are well off, when you have sufficient wealth for them, then we can leave it for different organizations. Even then, organizations should be specified, leaving a very general for sadaqah or for lillah. Understand? Now you have thousands of organizations, then there's going to be problematic for the people who are executing the state to sit and try to figure out where he wants it to go. One person's going to say, give it to this person. Another person say, no, I have family overseas, and it's a big mess. Specify where you want it to go, and it shall go there, inshallah. Now, going back to understanding, I think everyone got a broad picture of where Islam stands. Now understanding where we are. Now, I am by no means expert in legal aspects of America, right? So, all I'm here to do today is give you some guidelines when you go to make your will, or I even propose that you should actually create a living trust. Now, there's a lot of people who object to the living trust method. Why? Because number one, costs money. So people say, hey, why should I spend more money? People are reluctant to spend money. That's number one. Number two, there are certain possibilities, or when we go to the lawyer, each lawyer has his own understanding of things, and sometimes they try to push certain ideas that they have had worked with over time on us. And so we become frustrated and say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do the living trust. That is why, understanding our limitations by Sharia, we can talk to the lawyer, and even under the suggestion of the lawyer, if we decide not to do something, that is something we have to be educated about. Otherwise, he will make us do whatever he feels is the best for us. Yes. Should we take their advice? 100%. They know the law. However, we should be grounded in what we are able to do with our wealth according to Sharia, and thus we can limit, okay, you may suggest this, but I don't want to do this. Now, number one, is writing a will in America enough? For most people, for anyone who has under 75,000 of assets, when we talk about assets, we talk about liquid assets in his bank account, then he can write a will and should be good enough. Why? Because he doesn't have to go to probate court, and he can, whatever is written there is very, very small amount of work, and it can be distributed however he has mandated it. In Texas, we have a little bit of extra problem, right? I'm going to jump a couple of slides. We have something called community property law in America. Anyone who gets married, every one of their assets automatically is regarded to be shared 50-50 between him and his wife, irrespective of how much who puts in, and that is just law. Now, there's 2 ways to get in. Now, there's something that a lot of time, even I, for the most part, till I came to know certain things, did not agree with it, prenuptials. Prenuptials, and for a great part in Islamic society, was something that was looked down upon, right? And why? Because, as if you're making the whole marriage about money. And I completely understand where that's coming from. But in America, where otherwise a non-Islamic methodology will be implemented, if you do not do something from before, prenuptials become very, very important. Because as soon as you get married, anything you will acquire within that marriage, unless very specifically dedicated that this person got this in inheritance and she got this in inheritance, will automatically become a what? Shared 50-50. And you cannot do anything about it. That's done. However, in prenuptials, if you dedicate that whatever I earn, this percentage of it is mine, unless I specify otherwise, then it can be taken in care and prenuptials. Prenuptials is the best place to take care of that. Why? Because as soon as you present it to the court, then it is automatically accepted. There's something called postnuptials. Can you use that? Yes. But usually has to go to probate court again, which takes days and days and days. Sometimes you have to get lawyers to approve that postnuptial, and it becomes a big story. Can you, if we have, a lot of us don't have prenuptials, can we still take benefit of postnuptials? We can, where we say that this wealth agreed by both husband and the wife, that this belongs to me and this belongs to her, and we have separated it accordingly, then it can be distributed after we die. That can be taken care of. However, it's still the wrong process, and we have to do our due diligence to ensure that this happens. Now, Once we have overcome the community property law, so now we come down to, let's say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us maut and iman, we leave this world, and now the estate comes down to us, or to our inheritors. We have a few things. Number one is if we have properties. The properties, if now that will go to, as soon as a person has any property is more than 75,000. Yes, so most property is more than 75,000. Where is it going to go? It's going to go to probate court. Listen. Any other money? Listen. Let's say you have 401ks. 401ks, you have beneficiaries. Listen. All those things you can set your beneficiaries. Let's say you set your beneficiary as your wife. And you trust your wife that inshallah, she understands, she will become the beneficiary, she will call the imam, and she will distribute all the wealth accordingly. You trust her, alhamdulillah, and she trusts you. Allah forbid you and your wife die in a car crash. Where does it go? Beneficiaries are gone. According to what you wrote down. Where does it go? It goes to probate. It goes to probate. Again, what happens? Everything is broken down. Days after day, you get a lawyer who gets inheritance. And after that, you even forget, because the original beneficiary is not mentioned, everything is still going to get taxed. I'm not even bringing the taxes into account, right? So then after that, you have, forgetting what the terminology is when the value of a property increases and you sell it, capital gain. Capital gain taxes. Let's say it took 2 years for you to sort everything out. Then finally what happens? Your children get a hold of the property. Within that property year, maybe everything went up by 100%. They are going to be taxed upon the 100% after having sold. So now, I understand Deen is not about getting more money. Yes, I understand. But why give the money away to someone who is not going to utilize it for any good purpose, respectfully? Where you could have given it to someone who is a Muslim, who is a part of your family, who could have benefited from it, instead of giving it away. That's my point. And this is where we come into creating a living trust. When we go to a lawyer and we create a living trust, this is what they do. Number one, they create a trust, and over there you can have, I'm forgetting the term, whereas you, Yes, refundable, there's a word, retractable. Yes, revocable, You create a revocable trust, and you can put on there that once I die goes in trust, which becomes irrevocable. Now it becomes irrevocable. So now, as long as you're alive, what can you do? You can take it out, you can make changes as you wish. Once you die, then it becomes irrevocable, it becomes settled. And then the people who are beneficiaries and whoever you have set as the person who's going to execute it, can execute it accordingly. Now, one of the things you can ask the lawyer to do is, you can ask that there can be a consultant on there, or you can ask as an individual or an organization to be a consultant. I always feel better as an organization, because if that person you put as consultant dies before you, the whole thing is lost. So now, if anything goes upside down, besides what you have already put on there, then obviously they can consult those people and accordingly can make the changes. So if you put for example, I would personally put something like Sharia board, or someone else has another organization they feel comfortable with, they can put that as people who can be consulted in case that there are certain things are not understood according to Islamic law. However, the executioner will be who? The lawyer who you have chosen to execute. Under the living trust, besides the wealth, now, so in simple words, going back to any person that has $70,000, $5,000 or less, then inshallah he is fine, and he doesn't own a home. He can go with the will and should cover most of the things that he needs to be covered. But a person who has multiple assets, has a home, then the ideal method would be to go down the living trust method, so that when he dies, everything goes into a trust, and then the beneficiaries in the trust are benefit from there. Now, within the beneficiaries, there's something that allows, and I mentioned this not because it's very important to the topic we're talking about, but because sometimes people object. One of the things people object to with regard to creating a trust. In a trust, a parent or a guardian has a right to hold back the wealth from the beneficiaries to a certain point. So a person can put a certain age, 25 years of age, or until he finishes college, etc., right? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a precedence for this from the Sharia. However, how a person uses it, again, is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the present in the Quran? وَلَا تُؤْتُوا السُّفَهَاءَ أَمْوَالَكُمُ الَّتِي جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا. And do not give people who are not mature in mind, understand, the wealth that you have acquired, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you responsible for it. So now, we all understand how the youngsters in America are, and let's say if I pass away and I leave this entire trust, which may be in the thousands or in the millions, to a youngster who doesn't have discipline, what could happen? It could end in a few days. In this, we have to have two things in mind. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that person inheritance, that was the will of Allah. That was the will of Allah. And Allah knows that that person may use it positively or negatively. That's not your job to control. You have to allow him to do as he wishes. And if he makes mistakes and he ends up in the streets, whose fault is it? His own fault. However, there is a limited amount of control Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Now, what is a limited amount of control? What we know as the age of bulugh. So you can set the age of bulugh as a requirement, and according to us, Islamically, it's 15 years or older. And subhanAllah, if you sit your children down and you take their agreement that, you know what, we want to hold it back till the age of 18, let's say, and they agree to it, because whose right is the inheritance? The children's right. And they give you the right, okay, you know what, that you can put it in the stipulation, the age of 18 only will get the inheritance, that is fine with us. Then what can you put that in stipulations? Yes. Why? Because they have given up their right, which has been given to them by whom? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can put that stipulation. However, to put, you know what, age of 25, age of 27, how do you know that person will still live till then? Now you have caused a problem. Yes, till the age of 15, who has given you permission? Allah has given you permission. So you use that stipulation. After the age of 15, you can take the agreement. But remember, by you creating that stipulation, if they die, then you have caused more problems than benefit. Listen, that is why I would suggest we do not create stipulations beyond the age of 15, because at the end of the day, we're not answerable to them. We're not answerable to any government. We're answerable to who? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's who we're answerable to. So that's one of the things I want to bring up. If you want to add the stipulations, keep the Islamic law in front of you, right? Now, when we go into beneficiaries, remember, in Islam, you have how much wealth you left behind. And let's say you left a living trust. And a living trust, maybe you add a stipulation over there, they can continue to invest your money to grow your money. That is something you can do. And they will continue to grow your money. What matters is the money on the day you died. This is very important. What that means is that, let's say, you left a stipulation that the money can grow. And based on that growth, you also said, let's say, 1/5 of my wealth will go where? To some charity. It will not be 1/5 of the wealth on the day you're distributing. It will be 1/5 of the wealth that on the day you die. Because whatever money grew after that, it belongs to the inheritors. Thus, you can take out the 1/5 on the day you died, and that can be given away as charity, not 1/5 of the total estate. Why? Because that has now become the right of the inheritors, and only if they allowed it, can they go to others besides them. So this is a few guidelines that I want to bring forward with regard to estate. And this is one of the reasons, if a person does have that much amount of money, despite the amount it costs, we should look into a living trust as soon as possible. Why as soon as possible? What does Umar, the hadith that we went back to, that a person should not have something that he can put a will into, the hadith is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will to stay for 2 nights without having his last will and testament written. And subhanAllah, we do not know when any of us will die. Now, I want to go back. I want to highlight 2 other things which is very, very important when it comes to wills, and why in America I feel this is fard. At least a will is fard. Maybe not a living trust. Okay, is there?
No, we have it on the wall.
Okay, on the wall. Okay. So now, number 1 is, besides the money that we're worried about, in America, end-of-life care. This is a common problem. Yes, and sometimes we have family members who can make the decision, but sometimes that, the children are so confused, and one family member is saying this, another family member is saying this, and the doctor is saying one thing, and everyone's confused. And it happens, I who's like, a very small masjid, I receive up to 10 calls so far. The bigger masajid, every other day they receive a call. That, our family member is in the ICU, we don't know what to do. So end of life care, how you should take care of it, how you want it taken care of, it is, you should write it down. I'm going to jump a few slides. Okay. Usually, when a person end of his life, he has a couple of things that usually doctors are worried about. Number one is pain management. That what kind of medications can I use? Some people choose that, I just don't want any pain management, just leave me, I'll go through the pain, and as I die, I'm going to die. Now, that's a person's own choice. Are we required to do so? No. Islam allows us to take things and medication which eases our pain. It's completely allowed. The only thing we have to worry about is we should not be taking any medication which would have potentially increased our, brought our death closer to us. That means such medication which cause our death faster. That is not permissible in Islam. Number two, passive euthanasia, the withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. This is permissible and according to some scholars even recommended. However, this is something that has to be made a decision on by yourself. By who? By yourself. That means if there's family members, they can choose to do so, but they're impeding on my right of life. They're impeding on my right of life. Because it's my right to take medication or not to take medication. Islam does not obligate the taking of medication. It is not regarded as suicide. If you have medication, you don't take it. Nothing wrong. And why? Because you trust Allah. Ya Allah, if I'm going to live, I'm going to live without the medication. If I'm not going to live, I can take the medication, I can live. So medication is not an obligation. If you choose not to take medication, you are not committing suicide. There's nothing wrong. But whose right is that? Your right. Listen, that is not the family's right. So now when the family is put in that situation, and son and daughter are sitting there, and the doctor is saying there's no point of giving medication, and son and daughter understanding that's the right of the parent, what are they thinking? Should you take the life support or not? Should we take the life support or not? Down to call the imam. And the imam, he can only give suggestions. At the end of the day, who has to make the decision? The kids have to make the decision. So they're in a dilemma. So if we can put that down, that if the doctor suggests, then we would prefer passive euthanasia, then that is easy for the children. They know exactly how to do it, and everything is according to your right. No one is impeding on right. Advanced life support. On the other hand, if you choose that, there's going to be war in your family, and you want to stay alive as long as possible to ensure that the war doesn't break out, then maybe it is better to choose ALS. That's not something I would suggest for anyone, or you put in your will. But that is a situation you may understand best within your family, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The second aspect with regard to end-of-life care, organ donation. Now, the reality is, again, the family does have a say. In America, the family has a say as how the deceased body can be taken care of, and usually that is respected. However, if you have it in your will, and that is a legal document, it has a much heavier, it's something much more applicable in the court of law than the family member's statement. So if you have it in your will, then none of my organs will be donated or be used for research purposes. Then you have written something and ensure your body is taken care of correctly. Now, a situation may arise. Let's say you pass away in some part of America where they're unable to reach your family members to make that decision with regard to organ donation. What are they going to do? They're going to take the law of the country and say, we can use their organs to do whatever we want. And thus your body will be desecrated. And so on a part of that will should be that after I pass away, the nearest mosque in Islamic institution should be contacted with regard to burial procedures. That should be part of your burial, part of your will as well. That my body should not be cremated, should not be used for research purposes. All those things, it should be buried in a cemetery, preferably a Islamic cemetery. Over there, you just like Islamic cemetery. However, if they're unable to find Islamic cemetery, then they are going to put it into a non-Islamic cemetery according to whatever they have available. Right. The third thing I want to highlight is, alhamdulillah, a lot of you, I think everyone's, about 50% of the people sitting here have young children, and others don't have young children. So maybe your kids are older. But subhanAllah, just the other day, there was a family who, mashallah, their youngest child was already in the 20s, and they had another child now, mashallah. So, alhamdulillah, Allah bless them. My point being, they're so old, they may pass away. Who becomes the guardian of those children? You go to court, and it's going to become a legal mess. Sometimes it's easy. If the father passes away, it just goes to the mother. If the mother passes away, it goes to the father, and so on and so forth. But sometimes if both, like I give the example, and it's not unheard of, where both father and mother pass away, what happens? Now it becomes a legal matter. Can the younger brothers take care of them? Where does it go to? And then within the family, one family says, I want the child. Another family member says, I want the child. It becomes a big mess. So in that, if you can stipulate, let's go. 1 second. Oops. I think I missed it out over here. Yes. So in that, this is a suggestion I received from a lawyer. And short-term legal guardians and long-term legal guardians. Now, for a lot of us, we have family members in America who can take care of, we could just transfer over to them. However, Islamically, who should become the next person guardian, that should be stipulated within our will. So, for example, if the father passes away, the mother becomes the next legal guardian. If both of them pass away, does the child go to the paternal family or the maternal family? Islamically, goes to the maternal family if the child is under the age of puberty, goes to the maternal family. At the age of 7, then he will go to the paternal family. The daughter stays within the maternal family as long as she can be taken care of by the maternal family. So there's these legalities that have to be taken care of. Now, if this is not stipulated within the will, what's going to happen? The law is going to do as they see fit. Let's say a father passes away. Mother has legal custody, according to law. The mother gets married to another person. Islamically, she actually loses legal custody of the child unless there is no one else to take care of the child. Where does the child go? The child goes to the nearest maternal family. Why? Because they'll take it, it's still their own family. And we understand whenever there is adopted child or a, not adopted child, foster child within a family, many times the foster child is treated differently by one of the family members. And thus, this can be avoided if the child is given to a family who really cares for the child, according to Islamic principle. Obviously, at the end of the day, the fear of Allah comes into play, and even a family member can take advantage of another even if they follow the Islamic law. However, we try to the best of our capability to ensure it follows the Islamic law. So now, short-term and long-term. Why? Because many times if our family members are overseas and we're going to seas and we wait for them to come, the entire time our children may even be put in a foster home where non-Islamic ethics are being taught to us. And subhanAllah, as much as you like it, when we may not like it, so when they go there, the children may be attracted to certain things in non-Islamic lives. And when they're attracted to it, now their parents come back with legal guardian they try to take them back. And they say, no, we don't want to go with you, we want to stay over here. Now you cause a different problem. Inform the judge, they say we don't like these family members. Why? Because we spoiled them within those 2, 3 months or 4 months that they have been in a wrong system. So avoid all this to ensure that there are short-term legal guardians who can take guardianship immediately. And then once the long-term legal guardians come through, then they can transfer over so that everything can be within Islamic understanding. I believe there was one more thing I want to touch on. I believe that's all that I wanted to touch on. So number 1 is state. Number 2, end of life care of children and care of the deceased bodies. These are the reasons that we should write an Islamic will as soon as possible. And subhanAllah, if our wealth is beyond 75,000, to understand that you'll go to probate. And if you go to probate, you're losing out money, you're losing out time. And thus for both of these reasons, even though it costs us something to have a living trust in which there is an executioner, a person who can execute the whole thing, it will be good. One more thing, advice, many a times, because of our cultural aspects, we want this person to be involved because one person feels like if I'm not part of the executioner's committee, then you know what, he has disrespected me. Respectfully, even if you want to have 5, you have respect for all those people. If you can have 5 people, you can have five people's opinions sitting there causing problems. So you rather have one person to execute the entire state, and subhanAllah, you can give him someone to consult. You can give him a consult, and that person can consult that person, and according to the consult, then he can distribute the state. As soon as you have multiple people to execute the state, you're creating more problems. That's when Islam also, the wasi, Now, who's known as the person who executes the entire estate, he's usually regarded only one. Usually do not have multiple wasis. You usually have only one wasi. And you should always have a backup in case the wasi dies before you die. Understand? Thus, if he is gone, who should be next person? Or at least a process to choose a wasi. A process to choose a wasi, so that person that can then execute the entire estate, inshallah. Again, many people may have certain questions with regard to legal aspects. Now, I may not be, I'm sorry, not may not be, I am not qualified enough to answer a lot of those legal aspects. That's why if you guys see on the screen, I put 2 numbers and 1 website. One is Fawaz Ma'roof, he is over here. Okay, Osman Qureshi, he lives in Frisco. Okay, Fawaz Ma'roof, I don't know exactly where he lives, but yes, he practices in Dallas. Leonard McDaniel, he actually has a whole part in his legal in his practice where he makes Islamic living trust, which is conformity with Islam. And he's been working with the Muslim community for a very, very long time, and he's located in Texas, so he's very aware of the Texas laws. So these are 3 that comes to mind. There's one person I actually worked with personally from Houston. He flies in and out from Dallas on a regular basis. I lost his number. But as soon as I get it, inshallah, I'll pass it over to the rest of the community as well. I worked with him. He was very easy to work with. He has knowledge of Islamic law as well, and that's very important. Sometimes there are a lot of non-Muslim. By the way, Leonard McDaniel is a Muslim, right? He's a revert, and so he's a Muslim. He's aware of the Islamic laws, etc. There are non-Muslims who accommodate this and who are actually knowledgeable, right? However, they won't have the same level of importance and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's key. At the end of the day, taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plays a key role in what advice they will give you in terms of the wealth that you are presenting to them. Otherwise, it will just be about, hey, it's another estate that we're planning, and make our money and to give him all the suggestions we can. And maybe there's sincerity in it, and maybe there isn't sincerity in it. So those things to keep in mind, inshallah. Inshallah, I'll try, if there's any questions, I'll try to answer it. Yes. No, not entire. 1/3. Maximum amount that a person can give from the deceased estate is 1/3. Nothing beyond 1/3 can be given. What I said was, a person may give the entirety of the 1/3 away. Yes, entirety of the 1/3 away. There is a few. I think actually they came from some of the community members that I went through. All of them have their issues. All of them have some goods in them, some issues. And I believe the issues are not particularly there because they were there to make an issue, but usually because if you're going to go through any system, which in America is do it yourself. New things. Everyone wants to do everything themselves, right? And so as soon as you go to do things yourself, you're always going to run into these problems. And that's why, even if you have these templates, and you may fill them in, you should always get them shown to what? To number 1, a scholar, and then to a lawyer. Number 1 to a scholar, then to a lawyer, to ensure every aspect. And that's why I feel all these problematic parts that were each one of those forms was what? Because whoever made that understood that he's going to take it to a person to check it, and then they'll be verified and they'll be rectified. In this one, in the website, McDanielsEstatePlanning.com, he actually has, you can do it yourself. He has a do-it-yourself part, but again, it's through him. So I believe there is some benefit to it. There is one I'm going to share over here. Let's see. It pops up.
Even on sister side, there's a scan for a Q&A. Scan if they want to ask a question. You can tell. You can say something.
Okay. Someone tell me how this Mac works. Oh, there we go.
I have a question.
Yes, definitely.
So have you or anybody in the crowd, have you guys tried any of the AI engines like Gemini or ChatGPT and had good luck with getting good information?
No. I apologize.
Which one has better information about these Islamic rulings and all that? So I thought maybe someone should try it because it's a really good resource.
Yes, it is, but no, I did not.
And you can also provide your own documents. So if this is, we have like a PDF that just explains all that, you can actually feed that and it can give answers on the basis of that.
I see, yes. Unfortunately, I'm not as AI savvy. So, but
Is there any place where I can actually download this as documentation that has all the details in the form of PDF? Does that website has that?
whatever I said, the website
The
to.
form, or the template, I think. You asking for the template? Not the template, all the information, all these rulings and all that.
So he's talking about the Islamic rulings
Yes.
plus the state rulings. Yes,
So
side by
in
side.
the form of documentation.
Yes. No, I have not. I have not come across it. Listen,
Maybe I would use that website actually, and the system can actually go into the website and can bring the
you pull some information. Yes.
It's very helpful.
Yes.
It can answer a lot of the questions and give you really good knowledge.
Yes. So I'm going to share this. There's a whole bunch of things over here. So for example, INT form is one of the ones that obviously is local. I went through it and said, again, like I said, each one of them has benefits. The one, the Texas Muslim will, I actually try to make my own will. Then I got to a part, I was like, okay, I'm not too comfortable here, so I stopped. So at the end of the day, each one has an, let's say a person, I think one of the reasons we actually did this program today, instead of in the future a little bit more detail, where we actually call a lawyer in, he explains what the Texas law is, which you want to do in the future, inshallah. So he can give you much more insight. Obviously, it will come with the fact that every lawyer is going to advertise himself also. We have to keep that in mind. That's just reality. There's nothing wrong if someone's providing service. Is that people are going for Hajj, and one of the concerns a lot of people have is that, before I go for Hajj, I cleanse myself out. Because one of the things is that when I go for Hajj, we do not have guarantee of life. It's a massive journey. And a lot of people tend to try to make their will before they go for Hajj. That's why we did it as soon as possible. Nevertheless, inshallah, in the future, we will have a more detailed program with a lawyer in person to answer some of the legal questions. Yes.
A lot of resources. Excellent, excellent. Okay, I will just get in touch with you, get the reference of the website. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So you mentioned that there is a lot of things out there.
Mm.
We always want small cloth for the market.
Mm.
So why don't we, come up with that, our own building, make a template for ourselves? And we can help you as well. Work with you, some brothers from outside, work with you, some of the new, that's another question.
That's
Conversation.
Yes, that's.
Second one is going back to the comment that we had about having those stipulations in the trust.
Mm.
The perception a lot of community members have is stipulations are probably not a good idea. But you mentioned that stipulations actually are, as long as they don't cause more problem.
Yes.
But nobody knows what kind of problem,
In the future.
5 years, 10 years, you don't know, right?
Yes.
So, in a nutshell, again to summarize, stipulations are okay.
Stipulations are okay as long as they conform with Sharia. Yes. Stipulations are okay as long as they conform with Sharia. So you cannot bring the stipulation. Look, when we put stipulations, we always put stipulations hoping it will benefit something and it will create a certain restriction for someone's benefit. Right? Because I care for them. But there's stipulations. It's like, I'll give it, now a lot of you guys sitting here are parents, right? And my child goes up to 25 years old, and this is a common problem we face with a lot of parents. My child doesn't listen to me, he doesn't do as I wish. And you can sit with me, or you can sit in a senior scholar. And that senior scholar will tell you to make dua and give you ideas. At the end of the day, the scholar is going to tell you, uska zindagi hai, he has to make his choices in life. Understand? And so in a living trust, because now it's become legally binding, so what's the American law going to do? It's going to restrict it completely. And because now we have executive authority, the child will not, or the youngster will not be able to get that money. Now, if within that time, the child dies, you have restricted him from the authority which has been granted to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, whether he would have made a wrong choice or right choice, that was his problem. We couldn't have restricted that.
Not today, not tomorrow.
Yes. Inshallah, yes, definitely. So, for me, if we're going to make a list of stipulations, the stipulations will always be problematic to one person or another. And that's exactly what I saw with the laws, right? With the wills templates. Why? Because each person, when he built that will template, what did he do? He looked at the situation of certain his community members. That's why he made it. And he saw, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve this problem? Right? Now, the easiest way, that's why I give certain guidelines. Okay. Number one, look, Sharia has given a inheritance law. Right? So in there we have a stipulation which adheres to the inheritance law. Now, I'm going to summarize. Okay. Number one, if we're not married yet, we prenuptials. The point of the prenuptial is not about the money, but is to save Islamic understanding of things. Yes? Number two, postnuptial, if we don't have prenuptials, which is the case of most of us, to create a postnuptial document to ensure our property is divided. The wife's property, hers property, and my property is my property, so it can be divided accordingly. Right? Now, a person may say, my wife is very trustable. She can take everything after I die. She can distribute. And she could say the same. And now both of you guys die. Now there's no trustable person. Now we have a different problem. Right? So that's the reason that is there. Right? The postnuptial. Now, once that has been created, within the living trust to create a stipulation where we adhere to the Islamic laws. And if you look at INT's will, they actually have the every single share in there. That if this happens, this happens, this happens. There's, I think, 17-page document over there. And respectfully, each lawyer is going to look at that and is going to understand himself without consulting an Islamic understanding of those shares. And Islam has very unique understanding of calculation. And subhanAllah, if you guys historically, if you guys look at it, algebra was actually, one of the purpose of creating algebra was to solve our inheritance. However, and now it's being used, however, it's being used. However, there are some unique formulas that are used only in the calculation of inheritance, not even found in algebra, normal algebra, right? So that can only be known by whom? Person who is an expert in Islamic authority. So that has to be consulted. So we use that as stipulations. After that, we can use as stipulations which benefit people. For example, do not give it to my child until he finishes 15 years old, etc. But let's say we make a 25-year-old without the agreement. Now you have exceeded your rights as a parent, and that's where the problematic is. So I believe if we just can become educated with the limits set by Sharia, that is more than enough. We don't need to create extra stipulations because then in one place or another, you're always going to be impeding on someone else's right.
One more question.
Yes.
Do both spouses need to be in cooperation? And if one of the spouses is not cooperating, can I go ahead and do it myself? The will.
No, in Texas, that will become a problem. So now, in Texas, that will become a problem because you have a communal family law. So if you go to, the only way you can get around it, not really get around it, is you can say within my 50% this was going to happen. So unless you have a prenup. So the only way everything can happen is both husband and wife agree on a postnup. And now the wife will come to know, hey, I only get the car, I don't get the house. And so on and so forth. And then it will become a friction, but you have to do it. You have to do what you have to do, yes. Or you can do it as most other people, many lawyers will come to you and tell you to make the law which is already applicable in the country become Islamic so that no one is sinful. So that no one is sinful because this is what's going to happen. In the eyes of Allah is what you did, right? So let's say we don't do post-nup or pre-nup and any of this and everything is left. Or even I create a trust and I hope everything goes well. What's going to happen is after you die, that 50%, everything that you wrote down in your living trust or in your will be applied to your 50%. That means the other, let's say, 50%, part of which maybe 10% actually belongs to your wife. The 40% which is not distributed, your wife is sinful for not allowing Islamic law to apply to it. Now you could have, at the end of the day, we care of the akhirah. What would you care about? I want my wife to go to Jannah. So I may Allah forbid, may Allah unite our families. But as much as differences you have, inshallah, do not want your family to go to Jahannam. So you want her to go to Jannah, right? So it's better to give it to her as a gift. At least what happened? Then she is not sinful for not giving that up as part of the inheritance distribution, right? So most lawyers, that's what they'll tell you, understanding that, you know what, once she comes to know that, hey, I have to give away what could have been mine by the law, I have to give it up, I don't really want to do this post-nup. So let's just not do it. In that case, maybe the better option would be, hey, okay, whatever is till now is 50-50. Whatever is post now is mine and this is yours. Any other questions? Yes, that will. That's our whole point. So if you're going to write a will, and it's going to be beyond 75,000, then the will is only a document in court. There's going to go to probate court. They're going to look at that. Then you're going to verify it. And then if they feel that everything is how they want it, they will execute it. Or sometimes they'll execute it partially. At the end of the day, it's the judge's hand how he wants to execute it.
So the living trust is an easy way out. That doesn't have to go to the probate judge.
Yes.
No legal entities
No.
involved.
Yes.
You take care of your thing on your own.
On your own, yes. That's you appoint a person who executes it. You appoint how all the requirements, however you want it. That's how. That's
The safest and the right route to take care of the thing.
I don't know about right. It seems to be the safest. I'm not going to use the word right in the sense because everything has its problems. Yes. Yes.
You don't need Islamic thing will for giving it to.
I'm sorry.
For Islamic Sharia,
Yes.
we are getting a bit short mention.
No, you can mention. There's absolutely nothing wrong.
You know, questions.
No. I don't know. Now with Trump, he might. But, but yeah. So you can just stipulate over this my stipulations. You don't have to write Islamic stipulations. Yes. But even let's say you write you refer a consult. And on the will you refer a consult that hey, if this thing's going on, this organization, this person should be consulted. That consult is going to mention what? A masjid, Islamic organization, or imam, and immediately they're going to pick up what's going on. So.
Just for clarity, you mentioned the will and trust, and based on what you presented, your suggestion is, in addition to will, do the trust as well.
Yes. Indeed. And once you build it, whenever you go to a lawyer to make the living trust, they'll bring a will in front of you. So you can write a will part of it. A will be part of it. Yes.
So basically, writing a trust is not against Sharia.
Now, writing a trust is not Sharia as long as you don't break the laws of Sharia. Yes. The only reason, because the only reason we're going down this route is because if we don't do it, we have 100% guarantee of what? Non-Islamic. Yes. So the only thing, the reason we are suggesting a living trust is not because, like we said, it is the right method. It's just a way to protect our Islamic identity. That's it.
Basically, it's not an apples comparison with a liability insurance versus a comprehensive insurance. Typically, you just go with the liability insurance just because it's the law of the land.
Yeah.
But that's not the case with this.
Yes, that's not. Yes.
So, I guess the question is my wife expected to have her own will? That same rules apply to her?
If you're going to write will that's under 75,000, then each person will have to have their own will. But if it's going to be part of a living trust, again, this is better to ask a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, understand? But if you're creating living trust, then you have beneficiaries within the living trust, and everyone can be contributors and beneficiaries of the living trust. So contributors and beneficiaries. So you remember, in a living trust is like again, this is one of the reasons Islam doesn't, or Muslim scholars from outside may object to it, because we do not recognize in Islam a non-living entity as an entity. We don't regard them. We always hold a person responsible. And it has reasons for it. That's for some other time. So because we don't recognize that non-living entity, that's why a lot of scholars coming into America, not seeing what's going on here, they will disagree with it. They'll say, no, this is not permissible.
The trust.
Yes, the trust. Now, in the living trust, however, the way it works, you have contributors, and you can add multiple contributors. All these part of that means any person dies, his estates will come into here. And then there's beneficiaries from there. That's how you create it. Inshallah. Anything else? Subhanallah. Yes. Yeah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, if we can make a quick dua. So the main reason I want to make a dua, this is the first time I've done the presentation on this. But I hope that Allah does not hold me accountable for anything wrong. I said, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله إليك يرجع الأمر كله اللهم لا نحصي ثناء عليك بعد أثنيت على نفسك Ya Allah, enable us to have our death in front of us all the time, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us death upon Iman, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, protect our families, Ya Allah. Protect our children, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, do not make dunya a means of their differences, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, do not make a dunya because a reason for deprivation of the akhirah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, you become pleased with us, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, you may
cleanse our hearts from the love of the dunya, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, what has been presented, Ya Allah, if there is khair in it, Ya Allah, that's from you, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, enlighten the rest of the ummah through it, Ya Allah. If there is a mistake, Ya Allah, protect those around us from the mistakes that we make, Ya Allah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي الأمي سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون.
I was able to pull the equations actually from the Islamic law of inheritance. Gemini. So Gemini, Gemini, you have that. Do you have?
In general, maybe you didn't have any doubts, mashallah. In this case, you had no doubts? बेकार हो गया हमारा काम ये मत समझो
यार ये क्यों नहीं चला?